The quest of the Ringbearer. Is this the best Middle-earth supplement we've ever had? Let's find out. Welcome to Zob Gaming. My name is Lachlan Linton Keane, and today we dive headlong into the quest of the Ringbearer, the newest supplement for the Middle-earth strategy battle game. We've had a series of these supplements come out since the new edition launched in 2018, but this one brings something a little bit different to the table, and I think it's going to be up there with the very best. I'm really excited to show you guys what is inside. It brings the standard offering. It's got a collection of narrative scenarios, some legendary legions, and some new profiles, but the scenarios are a little bit different. They've got a really kind of narrative focus, and of course we have some amazing extra mechanics because this is all about the quest of the Ringbearer. We're talking fantasy fellowships, we're talking some amazing new profiles and some really spicy legendary legions, and then 2 different ways to run your narrative campaigns using this supplement. It has got a lot of stuff, so let's dive straight in, starting with our narrative scenarios.
I'm going on an adventure!
As always, this book starts with a little bit of lore, and if you guys aren't familiar with the premise of this release, essentially, this is the quest of the Ringbearer. It is a series of narrative scenarios that follow Frodo's journey from the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring right through to the Return of the King to the crack of Mount Doom. So there is not a single scenario in which Frodo or our Ringbearer is not present. So we begin at the beginning, and that is as they leave the Shire. Frodo, Sam, Merry, and Pippin have been busted sneaking through Farmer Maggot's crop. This is a really cool scenario. It's very small scale, even though it's on a 4x4 board. Essentially, our 4 hobbits are trying to steal some extra provisions from Farmer Maggot and try to stock up on their way to Rivendell, whilst Farmer Maggot and his hounds are hot on their trail, trying to track them down. A little bit of light-hearted fun before the real menace arrives in scenario number 2, and that is shortcuts make long delays. This scenario pits 3 ringwraiths, the menacing servants of Sauron, against 3 of our hobbits, although they are joined by an unlikely ally, Gildor, Inglorian the Wood Elf. The hobbits simply have to escape off the eastern board edge, and the ringwraiths start as sentries, but they have a few tricks up their sleeves to slow down the hobbits, and finding themselves lost in the woods, if the hobbits fail a courage test at the beginning of their move, they're moved by the evil player. Our final scenario set in the outskirts of the Shire is an old classic, the Buckleberry Ferry, but this new take on this fantastic cinematic moment has some really interesting game mechanics. We have all 4 hobbits here being pursued by 3 ringwraiths who once again start as sentries and will be looking to raise that alarm to bring the pain on the hobbits and stop them from escaping on the ferry. We have some interesting mechanics where if any hobbits make a jump to get to the ferry and land in the water, if they fail a courage test, they have to swim back to the bank because they're afraid of the deep water, which is going to make for some interesting tactical choices for the Ringwraith player. And if the Ringwraith player can combine this moment with his Cry of the Nazgul once per game special rule, he can reduce the courage models by 3 and set up a pretty interesting trap to try and lure Frodo back to the bank and grab the ring for Sauron. In scenario 4, the hobbits have left the relative safety of Buckland and ventured into the spooky old forest. We've got a really unique little small-scale narrative scenario here where we find the hobbits pursued by the forest itself. The evil old man Willow finally makes an appearance. He's not a proper miniature or a profile, but he does have a pretty interesting special rule, and even the trees themselves are the enemy. It says here in the participants we have Frodo, Samwise, Merry, and Pippin, and the evil is none. No, really, which is a classic from the early Games Workshop writing days for The Lord of the Rings. The hobbits have to escape off the eastern board edge, winding their way through the trees. If the trees manage to inflict their last wound, instead of being slain, they suffer the effects of the paralyzed magical power, and the evil player is simply trying to get all 4 hobbits paralyzed at once to achieve victory. Some interesting little gameplay for a fantastic narrative scenario. Up next, we return to another classic scenario, Fog on the Barrow Downs. Here, of course, we have the 4 hobbits wandering the misty moors of the Barrow Downs and being lured by the Barrow Wights, but we have some really interesting mechanics here that are fresh and new for this scenario. We have the Barrow. Whilst within 3 inches of a Barrow Wight may spend a single point of will each turn without reducing their store of will. So there are going to be a lot of magical powers flying all around the place, but of course the hobbits are not alone on the Barrows. If they ever see a Barrow Wight with their limited range of 6-inch line of sight, they can attempt to call for Tom Bombadil even while in combat, and on a 5+ he will arrive, and then on subsequent turns on a 6+ Goldberry, his river daughter, will follow him, and they will come to the aid of the hobbits and save them from the nasty wights. Up next, we have the Nazgul in Bree. This is quite possibly one of my favorite scenarios from the book, and it's got a whole bunch of extra stuff going on. It is, of course, Aragorn and the hobbits trying to make their way through Bree while they are pursued by 4 ring wraiths on foot who are hunting for them. So it's got some really great stealth mechanics, and we've got 2 of our new profiles front and center, with Barlam and Butterbur and Harry Goatleaf helping the heroes navigate their way through the streets of Bree. The ring wraiths enter play on the first move phase via the main gate, and control of those models is determined by a 50-50 roll-off until the ring wraiths have managed to spot the heroes. On a 5-up, once they are within 6 inches, they will be declared as spotted, and the ring wraith player will gain full control of all of the enemy models. The good side simply needs to get Aragorn and 2 hobbit models off the eastern board edge, and the ring wraiths just need to kill Frodo. Things are going to be tough for the Ringbearer. He must take a courage test at the beginning of each of his moves to see if he succumbs to the lure of the ring. If he fails, he immediately puts the ring on, becomes spotted, and the ring wraiths will charge towards him. That will, of course, combine nastily with the Harbinger of Evil rule from the ring wraiths, but for every additional ring wraith within 12 inches, he will suffer an additional -1 to his courage, but every friendly model in base contact will buff his courage up by 1, so it's all about his friends helping him get to the board edge and resisting the lure of the One Ring. Scenario 7 is another huge movie moment, with the ring wraiths led by the Witch King of Angmar hunting the 4 hobbits in the ruins of Weathertop. Aragorn is of course with them, but he doesn't start on the board, and on a 4+ of each turn he will arrive, so the hobbits have got some tricky times ahead to survive before Aragorn can come to their aid. With the journey to Rivendell almost complete, there is but one key moment left, and that is of course the flight to the ford. You can play this scenario with either Arwen or Glorfindel helping Frodo on Asphaleth, and it's a fantastic cavalry chase with the Witch King and 8 ring wraiths all on horse pursuing Frodo across the river. There's some extra special rules for damage dealt by the Wrath of Bruinen rising up to wash the ring wraiths away, but if they catch Frodo beforehand, Sauron will claim the ring for the power of evil. There's some interesting flavor special rules like Fortify Spirit being effect when you're close to Rivendell on that side of the bank, and Frodo, Sam, and the other heroes all start with no might because they are exhausted from their long march from Bree. The next 2 scenarios are depicting the Fellowship's journey through Eregion as they leave Rivendell and eventually head towards the Mines of Moria. Up first is the Pass of Caradhras, which is another little mini-game using our deck of cards, which is a fantastic little interesting flavor mechanic and explores, I guess, the Fellowship fighting against the elements rather than a specific enemy, although that storm is probably a little coordinated by the White Wizard himself standing atop the Tower of Orthanc. The second scenario is the Wargs in the Night, one of my favorite scenes from the books that didn't make it into the film, where a huge pack of wargs led by a menacing chieftain assault in waves and waves upon the Fellowship, and the Fellowship simply have to hold them off until Gandalf and Legolas do an awesome power combo to send a flaming arrow and explode the wild warg chieftain. Here we've basically got an unending horde of wargs until turn 11, where at any point if priority is drawn, the game will end, and the Fellowship simply have to weather the storm. The next 4 scenarios are of course depicting the Fellowship's journey through Moria. Now, none of these scenarios are sort of brand new. They're all kind of rehashes or readaptations of older classic scenarios that we've seen many times in different supplements, but they're just so well optimized. They work beautifully with the new edition, they look really, really clean, and they've got some really flavorful elements that sort of picks the best of the game design that's been seen in the past and puts them into these new 4 Moria scenarios. And you could even just run these 4 as like a mini linked campaign, as a Moria Fellowship kind of expansion. So we've got the Gates of Moria. This is of course the Watcher in the Water railing down on the Fellowship as they're trying to break their way into the gate. My only criticism of this scenario is that there's no mechanic to represent the Watcher in the Water's tentacles, and I really wanted an excuse to bust out my old tentacle markers and get them on some bases and have them attacking the Fellowship, but instead we have a really cool special rule for the Shallows that allows the Watcher in the Water to attempt to grab the members of the Fellowship and drag them down to the icy depths. Then we have Balin's Tomb. Now, I've seen this scenario a lot, so this is not really offering anything ridiculously new. It's just nicely optimized. It's got all the timings right with the right kind of participants matching up against the new powerful Fellowship profiles. So that one's definitely going to be a favorite of everyone, I think. On the 2x2 foot Balin's Tomb board, it's a really nice piece of terrain to kind of model up. And of course, we also have the new Balin's Tomb terrain. Although I say new, it's the old starter set terrain from 2005 that has been re-released released and is now available for purchase. It is out of stock at the moment all around the world because it sold so well, but it will be back soon in most territories. And it's got, yeah, all the pillars, the well, Balin's tomb itself, the trapdoors, and all those little lovely bits of detail. This particular frame we will be giving away at the end of the Quest for the Ringbearer week when we do our final stream. So if you want to get in the chance to win this guy, make sure you head over to our Patreon and pledge as little as $1, and you can score yourself all the bits you need to make up a fantastic Balin's tomb diorama. But I think this scenario will be a bit of a favorite of everyone because it's such a great 2x2 foot board to make up, and it's a really great scenario to run at tournaments and things where you've just got the Fellowship fighting off a horde of goblins. Exciting stuff. Then we have probably my favorite scenario from the Moria period, which is the escape from Dwaradelf. This scenario was sort of modeled on something that we saw in the Fellowship Journey book many years ago now, where you have the Fellowship kind of winding their way down the stairs and they're getting shot at by goblins, and goblins are trying to track them down and slow them down as they're trying to fight their way through. The walkways can crumble and fall, and the Fellowship can risk falling down the cracks as they're leaping over this crumbling stairwell. Some really fantastic stuff here with the goblins pursuing them and trying to trap them against those chasms as the thing falls apart underneath them. Really, really cool stuff. Then the big conclusion is, of course, the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. This is a really nice scenario. It's a 4x4. It's got a much better deployment plan than some of the older scenarios we've seen. The Fellowship are sprinting towards the gate, and the goblins are coming in pincer action from the sides. And then, of course, there's some fantastic special rules that Jay's put in called the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, which gives Gandalf the ability to try and sorceress blast the bridge apart and send both him and the Balrog tumbling into the abyss. Very, very loosely modeled, I think, on the scenario we played through recently on the Battle Games Middle-earth series. Some of the old retro scenarios have some great gems, and seeing them adapted here in fresh and new ways is really fantastic. Then we have Lothlorien. This is a very cool scenario that is based on something that is hinted at in the books, you know, there's a few scenes. It's not like a massive open combat like it is in this scenario with the Fellowship taking part, but it was something that was filmed initially for the Fellowship of the Ring, where the goblins and wargs and the big kind of pack of enemies pursue the Fellowship to the borders of Lothlorien, and there's a bit of a fight, and the elves appear out of nowhere and shoot from the trees and save the Fellowship. The Fellowship need to simply escape off the eastern board edge to reach the safety of Lothlorien, and the wargs and goblins want to just hack at their number and need to kill 4 of them for victory. The Wood Elves will spring up at some point during the game and unleash a horde of arrows and then get stuck in to help aid the Fellowship on their escape, and there is a fantastic horde coming after them. 2 goblin captains, a wild warg chieftain, 24 goblins and 18 wild wargs. What a horde for the Fellowship to fight off. After Lorien, we have another little mini arc within the campaign, and that is, of course, the Armonhen arc. And there are some wonderful Armonhen scenarios. I think Jay did a fantastic job in the Armies of Lord of the Rings book with a couple, and somehow he's managed to find another amazing set of scenarios within that same context. And what we have here is, once again, just like Moria, 4 scenarios that depict some of the micro moments and then the overall conflict of Armonhen. So we'll whiz through them. First up, we've got Aragorn's stand. This is on a 2x4 board, and it's all about Aragorn's moment. So it's just Aragorn, Gimli, Legolas, and Frodo, and he's fighting Lurtz and a horde of 24 scout Uruks, and it's all about the conflict around the Seeing Seat. The scouting Urukai are kind of coming in all over the place on a 4+ from the board edge chosen by the player with priority, which is very interesting. And then, of course, we've got Legolas and Gimli arriving on random turns, so they're not there from the start. It just starts off as Aragorn and Frodo. Then our second one is kind of that other micro story element, which is Boromir's redemption. So this is just Boromir, Merry, and Pippin, and they're fighting off the Urukai scout captain with two-handed weapon and 18 Urukai scouts. The hobbits, of course, are the target for the scouts. They want to grab them, smash them, paralyze them, and run them off the board edge. It has a random game length, which makes very interesting, and you can also pair this with the first scenario, just like you can in the Armies book, and you can have the games almost play side by side as if they're on different parts of Armonhen, and the turns are tied together. So whatever game length the first scenario goes for is how long this game lasts for. The evil player wins if he can get both hobbits off the board, and if the game ends as per the game length before that, then it's a victory for Boromir and the forces of the Fellowship. Our next scenario is the breaking of the Fellowship, and this story idea is probably the newest that we've seen for these scenarios, and this is simply Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli and Boromir. The kind of narrative elements are a foregone conclusion. Merry and Pippin are captured and Frodo and Sam have escaped, but Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli have a chance to get to Boromir and save him. Boromir starts with only 3 might and 1 wound, but he re-rolls all his dice in the duel roll, so he is absolutely enraged in the midst of combat trying to avenge the hobbits who have escaped, and of course Lurtz, he's here. There are 24 Uruk-hai scouts, and Lurtz has got a very special shield throw rule, which is, you gotta line that up against Aragorn. Super themey stuff, and we might even see that shield throw a little bit later on in a Legendary Legion. We'll have to wait and see. Then we have Ambush at Arm on Hand, and that is the full scenario. So we have got all 8 members of the Broken Fellowship. We've got Lurtz, the Uruk-hai scout captain, and 24 scouts, and that is everything happening all at once on a big 4x4 board. You've got Aragorn and Frodo starting up on the Seeing Seat, Merry, Pippin, and Boromir over near the river, and Frodo and Sam over in one corner. You've got a set of objectives, and this allows you to kind of play out the entire scenario in one massive battle, which is very cool as well. And that concludes the Fellowship of the Ring and our Arm on Hand arc. So you can already see how, it's such a linked journey with this kind of big narrative. We've tracked the Fellowship's journey until they're broken. You've got opportunities for little mini campaigns with the Moria sequence or the Arm on Hand sequence if you just wanted to play a small selection of scenarios. But now, of course, this is where the book gets really interesting, because we leave all those members of the Fellowship behind. They're gone now, and now it's all about Frodo and Sam and their journey. And that's the really fresh take here, I think, is this through line of just sticking with the Ringbearer. So the first scenario we've got on their Two Towers journey, I guess, is the taming of Smeagol. I don't think we've ever seen a scenario like this before. Essentially, Frodo and Sam are asleep and Smeagol's trying to get down there and steal the ring, and there's some really cool special rules for kind of them fighting each other, and essentially they have to subdue Smeagol to their will. Continuing our theme through the Emyn Wheel and then down into the Dead Marshes, Mr. Jeremy Hunthaw, you'll be very excited. We have a Dead Marshes scene returning, and it's an awesome setting, right? The misty, ghostly marshes, Smeagol and Frodo and Sam stealthing their way through. There are 6 spectres, Dead Marsh Spectres, and a Ringwraith on Fellbeast that they all have to contend with. There is the Don't Follow the Light special rule. If a good model is moved into any of the marshlands as a result of the Spectres, a Fell light within them, which is where they get to control enemy models. On a 1-2, the model succumbs to the power of the Spectres and falls into the marsh. They are now prone, and a model that has succumbed to the Spectres cannot act in any way, and if they remain in the marsh at the end of the following turn, they are removed as a casualty. So some really sneaky sniping abilities for the Dead Marsh Spectres to be able to kind of pull in the hobbits and try and kill them. The Ringwraiths and the Dead Marsh Spectres all act as sentries, which of course helps facilitate those stealth mechanics, but if Frodo ever puts on the ring, the Wraith will certainly be alerted to his presence. So a really fun, flavor-filled scenario. Then we get a little bit further through the Two Towers and we've dived into Ambush in Ithilien. This is basically a reprint with subtle changes from the Armies of Lord of the Rings book, but it's nice to have it here for completion. There's the 2 Mumakil, they're kind of making their way through Ithilien.
Take 'em away downtown, walking fast.
Faramir and all his rangers are just pew pew pew, sniping and ambushing them, but we of course have the new ranger profiles, Anborn and Mablung, who have been added to the scenario participants, but definitely a really fun match. I've played this one out myself before. It is so fun pew pew pewing all of the Mumakil. Our last scenario in the Two Towers arc is Osgiliath. Now, we've seen a lot of Osgiliath scenarios before, but this one's really interesting because it kind of represents the flavor of our narrative journey of the Ringbearer within the broader conflict. So the evil players' objectives are kind of more combat-oriented because they're not really worried about the Ringbearer. They don't know he's there. The game's played on a 2x4 board, and the Orc forces are simply trying to control as many buildings as possible by putting units in them and having the most models within that building, whereas the good forces, they simply need to get Frodo off the board edge and make sure he survives. But of course, as the good player, you'll be using your Gondorian forces to try and stop the evil player from getting their objectives. So 2 very sets of objectives that represent the kind of narrative and the overall army considerations of each force, and to represent that swirling maelstrom of conflict, any warrior model that's killed simply comes back on from another board edge on a 4+. So there is going to be a hell of a lot of combat and conflict going on for the Ringbearer and Sam and Gollum to wind their way through. So some very, very themey stuff here. And of course, what scenario would this be without an extra spicy Ringwraith Scream special rule to smash the good courage once per game? So some really, really themey stuff. That wraps up our Two Towers stuff. Then to kick off Return of the King, we've got Smeagol's Treachery, which is another little card game mechanic, just like the cards we saw earlier. This is a really fun one. It obviously represents that moment of Smeagol trying to kind of break up Frodo and Sam and plant the breadcrumbs and all that. Obviously, you can't do that kind of scenario with normal gameplay mechanics, so that's a really cool one for a minigame. And then we get into the big one, Shelob's Lair. Now, this is a very cool scenario that we've seen done before, and Jay's written up a bunch of special rules to kind of make this, I guess, a possibility, because obviously if you look at the raw profile of Shelob, she's going to rinse the Hobbit. So let's have a look at what we've got here. Samwise the Brave. Sam automatically passes all courage tests, and he carries the File of Galadriel, which means he causes terror. Not so close to the eye, Frodo can't put on the ring. Shadowed Hunter. Shelob may not spend will points to pass courage tests in this scenario. So that's the big thing, right? You just need to get that one wound, Shelob to fail the courage test due to her, I can't remember, what's the name of the special rule for Shelob? Due to her survival instinct special rule, which means of course she will run away, and strikes from sting automatically wound Shelob. If Frodo is slain, place a 25mm marker where he fell. If Sam moves into base contact with the marker, he may pick up and wield sting from the point after. So, sting is key. Very cool stuff. Then we have another classic. This is Cirith Ungol. We have a fantastic scenario here on a pretty cool board. It's a 2x2 board representing the different layered fortifications of Cirith Ungol, and then we have some super cool participants because, of course, it is a civil war. So Shagrat and 15 Mordor Uruk-hai are fighting Gorbag and 24 Orc warriors. And then we have a third participant contingent, extra models, Samwise the Gamgee. So Sam is an extra model. Let's have a look at how that works. Sam carries Sting in this scenario, and he increases his attacks characteristic to 2. Absolutely brutal for Sam. He can also spend a single point of might each turn for free. So Sam is a mighty hero, and additionally he causes terror. So this is the Sam Gamgee that we know and love, right? Terror, 2 attacks, 1 might per turn. I wish normal Sam was like this. So, controlling Sam. Sam is hurriedly trying to find Frodo and is not concerned about the petty squabbles within Cirith Ungol. Sam is controlled by whichever side has priority, as if he was a model in their force. He must abide by the following rules. He must always move his full distance if he is not charging, and he must always move closer to reaching Frodo. Sam can move through models belonging to the player that controls him, though he cannot finish in their control zone. That's very cool. He's like bobbing and weaving through the combat, and other models can never benefit from heroic actions declared by Sam. Now, our objectives are: the Orcs and Uruk-hai have descended into rioting over the Mithril Coat, wanting to claim the shiny shirt. The game lasts until either Sam is slain or he reaches Frodo. Whichever side is in possession of the Mithril Coat at the end of the game is the winner. If no one possesses the coat, it's a draw. The Mithril Coat is a large object. Models carrying the coat cannot wear it and do not gain any benefit from it, and Sam can never pick it up. And the Mithril Coat starts right in the top of the tower before the rioting begins. So some really cool mechanics here. I love this scenario. This will be so much fun. Just need to whip up a cool little board to play it on. I need to go over to England and borrow Harry's board, because he's got a very nice one. Then we have the Plateau of Gorgoroth. We're moving through these final story beats now, and of course this is that fantastic scene from the extended editions where Frodo and Sam are dressed up as orcs, and they are trying to stay camouflaged within the orc masses and escape past the orc horde on their way to the Crack of Doom. Frodo and Sam in orc armor are our good participants, and there is the orc captain, the orc taskmaster, of course, and 24 orc warriors. During the end phase of each turn, check to see if any of the hobbits are within 6 inches of enemy models. If so, roll a d6. On a 6, the hobbits have been discovered and are at the mercy of the orcs. Additionally, the hobbits will automatically be discovered if they charge an enemy or target an enemy with their throw stone special rule. We've got on the march here. Until the hobbits are discovered, orcs must move at least 2 inches towards the northern board edge and may not charge. Evil models that move into base contact with the northern board edge will escape and go off to war. So we've got this kind of ticking clock of the orcs being forced to move forward to represent their march, but they're also, the evil players got some control to try and position them to try try and alert the orcs to their presence. Frodo can't put on the ring, of course, because he's way too close to Sauron. And Frodo and Sam can also move through enemy models as long as they don't finish in their control zone, just like Sam could in the last scenario. So some really fresh mechanics here to represent some pretty cool story moments that wouldn't traditionally translate to kind of useful gameplay scenarios. So some great writing here to kind of capture these narrative moments and bring them in tabletop form. The final scenario, the end of all things. This is so cool. So this is a side-by-side scenario. We've got two boards happening here. There's a 4x4 scenario, or a 4x4 board, to represent the Black Gate. That's all of the men of the West valiantly standing in face of Sauron's armies. And then we have a 2x2 board representing the Crack of Doom and the slopes of Orodruin. We have some pretty awesome special rules. Our objectives are Frodo has to destroy the ring, and the game lasts until either Frodo has destroyed the ring, is taken over by the ring, or is slain. The good player wins if the ring is destroyed. The evil player wins if, you know, all the bad stuff has happened. Let's have a look at these special rules. Frodo can't wear the ring, and every single turn, at the start of each turn before priority is rolled, the evil player gets to use one of 3 magical powers to try and interact with Frodo. It's just a single dice. He can cast Exhaustion on a 3+. During this turn that the power is in effect, Frodo must take a courage test for each inch he wishes to move. If Frodo fails any of these courage tests, then he collapses and is immediately prone, but Sam may carry Frodo as a heavy object. So cool. Corruption can be cast on a 4+. The evil player rolls a d6 and compares it to Frodo's current courage value. If the result is equal to or higher than Frodo's courage, then Frodo's courage is reduced by 1 for the remainder of the game. If Frodo's courage is reduced to 0, he has been taken over by the ring and the game ends. And then he can cast Lure of the Ring on a 5+. The ring provokes Gollum to attack, and he is placed in base contact with the Ringbearer. They will fight as normal during the fight phase before Gollum disappears back into hiding. If Gollum is slain, this power can no longer be used. This is some of the coolest writing I've seen in narrative scenarios. That is so awesome. So you've got Frodo fighting, because he's essentially a ticking clock for the big scenario, fighting his way to get to the Crack of Doom, and the evil player's got all this cool stuff that he can do. I really love that. To destroy the ring, Frodo must be in base contact with the precipice, and then he enters a battle of wills with the ring. Each player rolls a d6, and you re-roll any ties. The first player to win the roll-off 3 times in a row will win, and the ring will be destroyed, or Frodo will be overcome by the ring, and the ring is mine, and go invisible, and all the bad stuff happens. But Frodo can spend his might points. So Frodo can spend his might, he technically has the upper hand, but a very swingy end to the scenario to see whether Frodo is overcome or is destroyed by the ring, which I think is perfectly representative of just how close things were to all coming apart at the final step. Gandalf doesn't have his staff. The orcs just come on in hordes and hordes and hordes. Good models can't leave their big kind of defensive hill at the center, and the troll chieftain is buffed up with some extra heroic stats and fearless. So some pretty interesting game effects. Essentially, the main Blackgate battle is just a huge kind of smash. It doesn't massively affect the outcome of the narrative scenario, but it's super themey to play them together. The participants I'm not reading out because there is so many of them, and that concludes the journey of the Ringbearer. So that is our final narrative scenario, but that is not the end of the narrative elements for our campaign, because of course they're all great standalone individual scenarios, but there are a whole bunch of fantastic mechanics for linking those into either a small or a really massive campaign. The first element of those is of course our scenario bonuses. These have been in every narrative campaign so far, so for each scenario there are a different effect depending on who is the victor. For instance, if the Nazgul in Bree, if good are victorious, during the Weathertop scenario, Aragorn arrives on a 3+ instead of a 4+. But if the evil forces are victorious, then he'll arrive on a 5+. So, some small in-game effects there. Let's have a look at another one. If the good forces are victorious during scenario 10, the Wargs of the Night, they may deploy the Fellowship within 3 inches of the Gates of Moria rather than the larger deployment zone. But if evil are victorious, Frodo isn't allowed to move during the first turn, giving the Watcher in the Water an extra chance to snag him. If we have a look at some of the really cool ones, which are the Arm on Hen, because we could use that as a lovely little mini linked scenario. Here for Boromir's Redemption, if you're victorious in this scenario during breaking of the Fellowship, which is the next one, Boromir starts the game with 2 wounds rather than 1, so he's not as wounded. But if Evil is victorious, then Boromir only starts with 2 might instead of 3. So lovely little kind of follow-on effects that aren't sort of hugely swingy, but they just make it a little bit harder or a little bit easier. So that's been in every supplement, right? But the thing that makes this so cool is just how linked these are. This is the quest of the Ringbearer. This is the journey of the Fellowship and their mission to get to Mount Doom. So if they die along the way, that's a pretty serious problem for, you know, the forces of good and everyone, and not great for Sauron if they get him. So there are some pretty amazing follow-on linking abilities that kind of encompass that. So the first thing we need to do is for any model that dies during the game that is removed as a casualty, we roll on an injury table. Now, if you are victorious in the scenario, you get a +1 to this table, and you'll see how important that is in a sec. It's a d6. If you roll a 1, that hero is dead. They are cooked, they are gone forever. So of course that +1 is bloody important. If you roll a 2 or a 3, they count as being wounded, and they start the next game with 1 wound remaining, and they do not recover any might, will, or fate unless they are chosen as the bravest companion, which we'll look at in a sec. And then on a 4+, they are recovered, they regain 1 wound, and then recover as normal. Now let's talk about recovery. In old scenarios or normal kind of campaigns, heroes just go back to full stats at each time there's a new game, but not so in this, because of course this is a linked story. So what you do is at the beginning or the end of every game, you need to select one hero from the Fellowship as the bravest companion, the one that, went above and beyond and pulled way above his weight. This model may regain D6 might, will, or fate points in any combination up to their starting values, and if the good player won the scenario, they can re-roll that roll, accepting the final result. Then for the rest of the Fellowship, they all count as fellow adventurers. They can regain up to D3 points of any choice, except for one model. If one model did particularly badly, they are called the Fool of the Took, and they recover no might, will, or fate, and are basically stuffed with whatever they finished the last scenario with. And the thing that's really nice about all of this is these bravest companion versus Fool of a Took, they're decided upon by both players. There's no specific metric. It's all right, you have a conversation about who you think went the best. And that is probably one of the most important takeaways from this campaign is unless you have a player who really enjoys just being the baddies, I would actually play this, that you're really both playing the Fellowship against this horde of enemies. And you might take turns, one player controls the Fellowship one time and then the other person swaps, but you're journeying together as players. It's almost a cooperative play experience, and you're watching this story unfold. Obviously, you try to get the baddies to do the most optimized things to challenge the heroes, but that is the way I would play this campaign. I wouldn't make it competitive in any sense at all, and I think that would be an amazing way to play it. The other important note is that there are also rest points built into the campaign, and these are of course places like Rivendell, Lothlorien, Ithilien, and when the Fellowship hits those rest points, they automatically get juiced back to full wounds, full fate, full might, full will, full, everything. They're back to completely full stats to start again. And I just think that that is a fantastic way to write a campaign. It is so themey. So themey. The scenarios are fantastic. The narrative overlay campaign elements are fantastic. There's lots of classic scenarios that are redone in fresh ways. There's lots of great new little special rules. Jay has done some amazing work with the bigger supplements. Not bigger in terms of size. This thing's massive, 128 pages, but bigger in terms of scale. You've got, the big war in Rohan and Gondor at War and those bigger books. But I feel, and they're great, and the matches and scenarios are great, but this seems to be where his rule writing really excels, is just like narrative and story and theme. I know that's really important to him as a writer, and it's so cool that this is the quest of the Ringbearer, and it's right here in book form. All the little cool moments that aren't normal wargamey kind of battles can be played out now, and I'm so excited to play through this campaign, and I think it is fantastic. That's campaign land done. I imagine a whole bunch of new viewers just joined us who skipped all that narrative stuff because they're here for the juicy stuff. Hello, competitive players. Welcome to Zorb Gaming. We are going to be looking at the armies, the new profiles, and the legendary legions that are in Quest of the Ringbearer. So our armies page is just basically a couple of overview pages that explain the different armies that are showcased within the supplement, and then if there's any profiles added, the profiles are detailed here. So first up, we've got our 2 new profiles. These have been released on Warhammer Community because these models have actually been out before the supplement, but we'll go through them now in case there's any changes. These are the 2 Rangers of Athelion. They're both minor heroes, which means they can lead 6 troops, and as you'll see later, they both slot right into the Rangers of Athelion Legendary Legion, but they can be taken as normal Gondor as well. So Anborn is up first. He's Fight 4, Strength 4, Defense 5, 1 Attack, 1 Wound, and Courage 4, and 111 for those heroic statistics. His only ability is heroic accuracy for actions, and he's got woodland creature as a special rule, and he costs 35 points. So you're like, okay, he's basically Damrod. Why is he 15 points more expensive? Lethal aim! Mental. So, Anborn can spend a single point of might without reducing his store to modify a hit roll, in the way roll, or wound roll when shooting with his bow. Absolutely nuts. It's a very powerful special rule, and yeah, it's really good. It's basically a free might point per turn, only to be done with shooting. That's all you're going to be doing with him anyway. Maybe 35 points might be too cheap for that. That is pretty serious. But we'll have to wait and see when we get him on the table, especially in the context in which he's going to be considered, which is the Rangers of Athelion. Mablung is up next. He's basically the same. He's got that same stat line, the same might, will, fate. He's got heroic accuracy, woodland creature, and he's 35 points as well. So he's exactly the same, except he's got a different special rule. Have a listen to his special rule. It's called Bird Calls. Mablung and any Rangers of Gondor within 6 inches of him, including the other heroes, gain the Stalk Unseen special rule. Additionally, enemy models targeted by a shooting attack from Mablung or any Rangers of Gondor within 6 inches of him, including the heroes, do not benefit from the Stalk Unseen special rule for the duration of that shooting attack. So he makes your guys invisible. Stalk Unseen is effectively like that Elven Cloak rule, and if other enemy units have Elven Cloaks, him and all his little buddies in a 6-inch bubble ignore that. At first you're like, oh, that doesn't seem as good as a free point of might. That is massive. So good. So good. Situational, obviously. Well, I mean, only the targeting is situationally obvious. The stealth ones are always good. So 2 very powerful special rules and 2 really interesting profiles. We'll have to see when we get to the Legendary Legion how they're going to impact how they're taken. Then we've got the Wanderers of the Wild, and these are our other 2 profiles. And I believe that I am revealing this information first. I don't think these profiles have been put up anywhere yet. So let's have a look at what we've got. Barlam and Butterbur and Harry Goatleaf. We're going to start with Harry Goatleaf because we all want to hear about Barley, and I'm going to keep you on the edge of your seat. Harry Goatleaf is a man, ruffian, infantry hero. He's a minor hero. He's got 3 fight, 3 courage, 3 defense, 1 attack, 2 wounds, and 3 courage. 1 might, 3 will, and 1 fate. He's got a dagger and a lantern for his war gear. The lantern is a passive special rule. The area within 12 inches of Harry Goatleaf is illuminated as if it were daylight. Models within this area can be seen clearly unless another special rule would prevent them from doing so. So that's cool. He's got a little lantern. Why is he 40 points, Jay? Well, let's just find out, shall we? Special rules. The Gatekeeper. During the priority phase, after priority has been rolled, Harry Goatleaf may spend a point of will to use this special rule. If he does so, select 1 enemy infantry model within 6 inches and line of sight and roll a d6. On a 3-up, that model cannot move that turn, though they can still do anything else they would normally be able to do. Harry can use might to influence the roll, and monster models cannot be affected. So 3 times per game, on a 3-up, or it'll be a 2-up once if you burn his might point, you can just stop an infantry model from moving. It can be a hero, it doesn't have to be a warrior, anyone within 6 inches in line of sight of Harry. Now that's very interesting. I don't know how competitively taken that model's going to be. I guess, how do we take him in an army is our next question. Let's have a look. There's a lovely little section here called Allies. It's almost like I'm leading in these questions. Harry Goatleaf can be taken as either a good or evil model. Amazing. He's on both sides. If taken as a good model, he's historical allies with the Fellowship. You can take him with the Fellowship, Green Alliance. Convenient allies with Rangers, Minas Tirith, Fiefdoms, Dead of Dunharrow, Rohan, Wildman, Rivendell, blah, 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 and impossible allies with everyone else. So mainly you're going to be taking him with historical allies. Lothlorien, Fangord, Misty Mountains were the other three. If taken as an evil model, Harry counts as a hero of fortitude, ruffian players, still your beating hearts, and he may be taken as part of the Sharky's Rogues army list. And the Chief's Legendary Legion. You thought I had him there, didn't I? So he's a ruffian hero. And you might put him in a Fellowship list for a bit of fun. But he's a ruffian hero. Jeremy, stop getting overexcited. I know you're babbling with excitement right now. But let's all get serious, because this is all why we're really here. Barlaam Butterbur, the innkeeper of the Prancing Pony. He's also 40 points. He's Fight 3, Strength 3, Defense 4, even though he's not wearing armor, because he's a nice big burly kind of dude. He's 1 attack, 2 wounds, 4 courage, and 1 might, 3 will, 2 fate. That's a bit of survivability, 2 wounds, 2 fate. He's got a cudgel, which counts as a club, which I love, and his actions are heroic resolve and heroic defense. This is actual durability. So once again, we're looking at 40 points. What is going on here? Well, it's all about those special rules. Jay loves his flavorful special rules. Barlaam Butterbur, at your service. During his move phase, if Barlaam Butterbur is in base contact with a friendly hero model, he can spend a will point to use this ability. If he does, roll a d6 on a 5+, that hero regains a wound lost earlier in the battle. If Barlaam Butter uses this special rule on a hero from the Fellowship army list, it's a 4-up. He gives people back wounds. So 3 will points, as allied into a Fellowship list, he's dealing out 1.5 wounds back per turn. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. Let's see what else he's got. Bill the Pony. You may include Bill the Pony in the same force as Barlaam as if he were part of Barlaam's warband, even if your force doesn't include Sam. If Bill the Pony is taken as part of Barlaam's... Wait for this. If Bill the Pony is taken as part of Barlaam's warband, he costs 10 points instead of 25. So for 50 points, you get Barlaam and the Pony, so Barlaam is effectively 25 points. That's awesome. Additionally, Barlaam may benefit from Bill's Pony's official meals and second breakfast special rules. So cool. Let's once again see how we can field him. So obviously, he's historical allies with the Fellowship. He's impossible allies with everyone except a few convenient choices, which are the Shire, Rangers, Gondor, Fiefdoms, Dunharrow, Rohan, Druiden, Rivendell, Lothlorien, Halls of Thranduil, Fangorn, and the Misty Mountains. Very, very cool. So that's all our new profiles. As we finish off the army section, we've got a little page on the Black Riders, a little page on Cirithungol, and now we're in to the Legendary Legions. So I previewed 2 of these legions already in a live stream where I did a head-to-head battle with the Breaking of the Fellowship and the Black Riders, so I'll link that down in the description below, but we're going to go through their rules now. The Breaking of the Fellowship. This Legendary Legion represents the Fellowship after Gandalf's fall, after they have left Lothlorien. So you've got 8 members. You've got Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, Boromir, who has the option for a shield. Note that Aragorn has no option for armor or bow. Frodo has the Mithril Coat and Sting, Sam, Merry, and Pippin. You have to include Aragorn, and he has to be your leader, and they're always deployed as a single warband, and every model gets an Elven Cloak for free. 40 points, thank you very much. Excellent. Now we have a bunch of special rules. The rules bloat is kind of real. It's only 9 models though, so it's probably fine. 8 models. Gandalf's dead. Let's go through the less insane special rules first. And I say less insane, but yeah, they're all insane. Blessing of Galadriel. Friendly models always count as having had the Fortify Spirit magical power cast upon them, and this stays in effect even if their will is reduced to 0. So you've lost Gandalf, but all of a sudden, magic just means nothing. Combine that with the fact that 4 of your hobbits have resistance to magic, and your army is very tough against magic. The Bond of the Fellowship. Models from this Legendary Legion count as being in range of a banner if they're within 3 inches of a friendly model. Massive. You've got banners all over. And it's not bound, right? You don't have to operate them in set pairs. You don't have to have the 300s together, the hobbits together, the blah blah blah. It's any configuration on the battlefield you set up. As long as they're close together, you're going to get banner effects. It has the You Have My Sword ability, which is the main ability from the normal Fellowship list, which is that everyone gains Fearless and Can't Be Broken while Frodo's still alive on the table. And then we have the big one. This special rule is called the Gifts of Galadriel, but it's basically 8 special rules. 1 custom special rule for each member of the Fellowship. Frodo has the Light of Erendil, our most beloved star. Once per turn, he can cast a blinding light magical power with a single point of will that he gets for free on a 3+. So 3 up each turn, the Fellowship's going to have blinding light. Sam has his Elven Rope. He automatically rolls a 6 for any climb, leap, or jump test. Merry and Pippin have the Daggers of the Noldorin. They re-roll any failed wounds in combat. Aragorn has his Elven Dagger, which gives him Uruk-Bane. Very cool. Or Uruk-hai-Bane, to be specific. Legolas has the Bow of the Galadrim. Whilst within 3 inches of a friendly model, Legolas may re-roll any failed hits when shooting. Because, you know, Legolas wasn't good enough at shooting. Now he re-rolls hits. I mean, it's certainly going to be able to do that moment at Arm on Hand where he's like, gets like 12 guys in a row, whatever it is. I think it's 9. Gimli, Galadriel's Locks. Gimli may re-roll all dice in a dual roll, and he may only use this ability 3 times per game. So once per lock of hair. And then Boromir's special rule is the Golden Belt. Boromir gains the Woodland Creature special rule. This is very cool. I love this Legion so much. It's definitely competitive. Obviously it's gonna, like all hero legends, it's gonna have some tough matchups and some tough scenarios, but you've got 8 models. This is a strong Legion. I would expect to start seeing this a lot. Yeah, we'd have to do some proper testing, I guess, to see if it's like, I don't think it's too powerful. If anything, I think maybe Boromir's special rule could have been a little bit more exciting than just Woodland Creature, but in saying that, Boromir's a powerhouse with 6 might, but he is the, you know, I think he's the 6, he's Boromir of Gondor, right? So he's 6 might, 1 will, 0 fate, so it might have been cool to, I don't know what, maybe like a strength buff, because he just like annihilates, or I don't know. Maybe increase his movement because it's tied to the belt. I don't know, something about the belt. But yeah, I guess that it has to be movement based, right? Because it's his belt. But perhaps a little extra buff. But I still love this. I love this so much. I think it's going to be definitely powerful enough and very, very cool. We saw that already in my live stream. Okay, now we have the Rangers of Ithilien. This is a legendary legion we've already seen before. It's basically exactly the same thing, except Anborn and Mablung have been added to the legion, and they can also take rangers that ignore the bow limit. So now you can get, I think it's 605 points of Rangers of Ithilien, all bows. Now, I've talked about this legion in the past. I have a huge problem with it. It is overpowered at very low points levels because it's quite swingy and you can just blast models off the board. So it's not good for like 200, 300 points. Maybe it's not overpowered, but it's very powerful. I have a problem personally with legions that are all shooting, basically, because or it's just you have one player rolling all the dice and one player just taking models off the board. It's a really boring game, and it makes for like a really negative play experience for the people playing opposite this legion. It's, you know, they've got Woodland Creature. It's really tough because I get why Jay's got this in here, because this is a fighting force, right? This army does exist, and thus you should have a way to field it. It's a really cool skirmishing list. A skirmishing force in the theme, in the lore, and so you want to be able to field that on the table, but how do you make it be on the table without that negative experience of, okay, I'm going to sit on the back of the board and I'm going to shoot the crap out of you? Obviously, scenarios come into play, right? So in a lot of scenarios, maybe that won't be the play experience, but I hate all shooting armies that have no real focus on combat. It's not just Rangers though, right? There's Osgiliath veterans in here, and of course there's Frodo, Sam, and Gollum. So my answer that I used to say when people will listen to me whinge about this and how would you improve it is I would have made Frodo, Sam, and Gollum that you had to take all of them. They were like a tax. But of course, then you're restricting the Legion to only being that moment in story time and not just being this general type of ambush list that existed in Athelion. So I don't know what to do. You will never see me run this at a tournament, though. I think it's really boring for my opponents to play against. I'd much rather, even magic-y armies, you know, there's combat involved in that, and even high control lists, there's still combats. You're still all rolling dice. I just hate blasting off. It's why I play something like Riders of Theoden versus, I enjoy that much more than like the kiting Rohan sitting back on the board. But even then, they go in and charge. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of all shooting lists. And I guess when you get there, they're only defense 4, fight 4. They're not insane. So, yeah, I don't know. You could always, my other suggestion is that you don't have this list, that you have a Defenders of Osgiliath list, and that you can take both. You know, you've got to take, it's like a 50% bow limit, so you're forced to take Osgiliath veterans. I think that would be a far more interesting Legendary Legion than Rangers of Athelion, but I do understand why it exists, and people love the theme. I'm going on and on about this, sorry. I spent hours running around in the forest with like a piece of fabric tied on around my neck as a cloak, and I had a bow and arrow and shooting trees when I was like 8 to 10. So when the movies were coming out, that's like all I did all weekend. So me and my friends would go and pretend to be Faramir, ambushing Haradrim. That was our life. And then we would go inside and watch the scene over and over again. So I love the theme. It's not that I hate the theme, it's just from a play experience it might have a problem. Anyway, we've seen that before, you've heard all that before. Let's get back into the stuff that's new. Lurtz's Scouts. This is a cool theme, and you may remember it's a legion that Lockie predicted for War in Rohan, so let's have a look at how close my old predictions were, and let's see what is new on the table. Lurtz with shields, Ugluk, Mahor, Uruk Scout Captain with the two-handed weapon option, Uruk-hai Drummer, and then of course Uruk-hai Scouts with all of their goodies. You gotta have Lurtz, he's the leader. First special rule is Relentless March. If your army includes Mahor, then any Uruk-hai Scouts in your entire force can be upgraded to Mahor's Marauders rather than just the ones in his warband, and this upgrade is free instead of costing 1 point per model. Additionally, Lurtz, Ugluk, the Scout Captain, and the Drummer all go to move 8, and everyone in the army gets Woodland Creature. It's an awesome special rule, and it's also one that I predicted back in War in Rohan days, and yeah, it's fantastic. Fast-moving Scout army. It's just like the Ugluk Scouts one, except obviously now it's Lurtz themed. A worthy foe. Lurtz may declare a heroic challenge against any hero model regardless of heroic tier. Additionally, if Lurtz declares a heroic challenge and the targeted hero declines, then Lurtz regains the might point spent declaring the heroic challenge. So this is interesting, right? So heroic challenge is sort of useless a bit. It's a very, very situational heroic ability, and I think it's probably something that maybe we could look at tweaking in the future just more broadly, because it's just I have not used it. I play a lot, and I haven't used it. I think maybe once in a scenario for fun. It doesn't see competitive play, very, very rarely. This, however, is different. This is a great tweak that gives Lurtz a really interesting option to mess with people. So, he can declare a heroic challenge to anyone. I guess for context, what does a heroic challenge do? 2 models who are in base-to-base contact each other. One person can spend a point of might to declare a heroic challenge. If the other model accepts, those models must fight each other and only each other until one of them dies, and then whoever wins gets to regain D3 might points. If the other model declines, it doesn't have to obey that restriction, but all of its heroic actions no longer affect friendly models. So you can basically spend a point of might to turn off their ability to call with me's. So it's very situationally useful, and most of the time you never want to accept, because you just get killed and then the other enemy gets D3 might, because usually you're not challenging someone who has a chance to kill you. Whereas this, Lurtz can challenge anyone regardless of heroic tier, and normally you can only challenge equal or up. So Lurtz can go and bully small heroes and force them to challenge, and then if they decline, Lurtz regains the might point, so it costs him nothing. So he can just be like, challenge, might point, you don't get to, they'll decline because they don't want to give Lurtz the D3 might, and then all the heroics mean nothing. A lot of people say, well, why wouldn't Lurtz just kill them? Yes, on the small heroes, it's probably not worth doing because Lurtz could just kill them. But on the like mid-sized heroes that even have heroic strike, Lurtz could declare a heroic challenge and then just shield with 6 attacks. And even if the heroes struck up, they're probably not going to get through, and they're probably not going to kill Lurtz. And then they've shut down the with me, they've shut down the heroic actions. So it could be, I think it could have some uses. But in general, I think a heroic challenge could need some work. I think I explained all that correctly. We'll have to wait and see. And then the final special rule is shield throw. Once per game, Lurtz can choose to use his shield as a throwing weapon. It has a strength of 4, and any man-sized model, and any man-sized or smaller model hit by the shield is automatically knocked prone. Once Lurtz has thrown his shield, he no longer carries it and cannot use it for the remainder of the battle. Even though he no longer has shield, his defense doesn't get reduced because obviously he already starts carrying the bow. So themey. So themey. I love it. The one thing I guess bums me out is it's still going to use his hit value. It's a throwing weapon, a single-use throwing weapon. So once he throws it away, if he misses, it's not going to happen. So I sort of feel like it should have just been an auto hit. And even though it's powerful, I don't think that would have been that bad. He pins Aragorn to a tree. I really, yeah, so I would have made it an auto hit. And in terms of power, like I do look at this and I sort of think it might have needed a little bit of a push-up. Really, all it's got is fast movement and with Lurtz, which is nothing to, Ugluk Scouts, blah, blah, but it has the whole thing of Ugluk Scouts has like the animosity thing going for it with the Orcs and the Uruks, whereas I feel like this is maybe just missing a little bit more flavor. So maybe one more special rule could have done it. And I know it's fast moving, but it is defense 5. Yeah, I think it's great, but I'm concerned it might have needed a little bit more something. But we'll have to see when it gets on the table. So up next is the Depths of Moria. Now this legendary legion is a Moria legion that is themed all about the Moria force that assaulted the Fellowship. So we have some serious unit restrictions, but some pretty cool special rules. Let's dive into them. First up, we have of course the Balrog. Now you must take him, and he is the army's leader. You have the Moria Goblin Captain and Shaman, the Black Shield Goblin Captain and Shaman, and the Goblin Drum. Then for our warriors, we have Goblin Warriors, Black Shields, Black Shield Drummers, Prowlers, and Cave Trolls. So, no Bat Swarms, no Warg Marauders, no Watcher in the Water, no Dweller in the Dark, and none of the named Goblin heroes. Groblog, Ashrak, whatever the other one's called, none of those guys are in here. So some pretty serious restrictions, but let's see what special rules we get. First up is the Dominion of the Balrog. This special rule gives the Balrog essentially a 6-inch +1 fight value bubble to all Goblin Warriors? No, just Goblin models, so your heroes and captains as well. It also creates a break contingency for the force. You can never be broken while the Balrog has 6 wounds or less, 6 wounds or more. If you've got 5 wounds or less, he will break as normal, or you will break as normal, and if he dies, you automatically break. So very cool, very themey. The next special rule is Drums in the Deep. The effect of a Moria Goblin or Black Shield Drum is increased from 18 inches to battlefield wide. Additionally, as long as the drum and one drummer is alive, they will count as banners for victory points in scenarios. That is huge for the Goblin list. It gives you those banner VPs, and of course, basically a banner effect all over the board, and whatever else the drums do as well. Some great synergies and options there. So those are some great kind of, I guess, some buffs that definitely help mitigate some of those losses. You get the fight value, which helps get rid of Groblog's kind of fight buffing, and helps kind of buff up your overall troops. You're not breaking as much, and you've got those big banner effects as well. But there are still 2 more special rules to go, and they are called Shadow and Flame. Shadow. Shooting attacks that target the Balrog will only ever hit on a 5+. And Flame. Once per game at the start of any shoot phase, the Balrog may select a single enemy model within 3 inches and roll a d6. On a 2+, that enemy is set ablaze. Kaboom! Burn, baby! This is an active ability, and after he uses it, he can no longer benefit from his ability Shadow. So, he casts off his shadowy kind of blackness and goes kaboom! And sets somebody on fire. The set ablaze special rule. So, very, very cool, very themey. Personally, I think I'd still run Vanilla Moria in most instances because I love Bat Swarms, I love Warg Marauders, I love the kind of crazy unit variation. I mean, you still got Prowlers, which are such an important element, but I really love all the choices, but if I wanted something that was so distilled and themey, I think this is still equally as powerful. That's more of a personal flavor choice. But yeah, it's pretty cool. A lot of the time, your army's gonna end up looking like this anyway. You just swap out Groblog for a captain, and you get all these extra special rules. So maybe it will be a no-brainer to run this Legion moving forward. Very, very cool. Then we have my favorite Legion of the book, our second last Legion, and that is the Black Riders. We previewed this on stream against the Fellowship, which was not a good pairing for it, but I still think it's very powerful. We have the Witch King of Angmar on horse. He must be mounted, and his only option is a Morgul Blade. No Morgul Crown. This is, of course, the Black Riders as they invade the Shire. And the Morgul Crown, in terms of Games Workshop's representation, it's supposed to represent the physical crown he mounts on his head for the Battle of the Pelennor, because technically he's always wearing a crown in his Twilight Ringwraith form, so you could argue that he should have his crown here, but that crown is meant to represent the movie crown that goes on his head, and he doesn't have that yet, so no Morgul Crown ability. That's a huge loss. We'll have to wait and see. Ringwraith on horse, 65 to 120 points. So, that's all. Maximum of 9 models. Witch King must be your leader, and the Witch King counts as a hero of legend in this army list. So that is pretty interesting. No named wraiths. I totally get it. I love the fact there's no named wraiths, except for one. I would have had Khamul the Easterling in there. And the only reason for that is a themy's choice, is that Khamul is actually the only Easterling in addition to the Witch King who was named by Tolkien. He is in fact the Easterling that is on the Buckleberry Ferry, and chases them and almost catches them as Frodo makes the huge jump and Sam says, "Frodo, jump!" That's the Khamul who pulls up short. Because he is sort of the lieutenant, and he's leading the ones that invade the Shire, whilst the Witch King hangs back with the others to try and hold the borders. So I would have had Khamul in there. Perhaps Jay and the writers can't do that, because I think that specific information might actually come from Unfinished Tales. It might not be in the appendices, which means they technically can't write rules based on it. But I would have just sneakily done it anyway, because they could have got away with it. So I would have loved to see Khamul there just from a flavor point of view. But otherwise, I love that there's no named race. Let's have a look at the special rules, because boy oh boy are they going to need to make up for the fact that I don't have access to the Undying, I don't have Khamul, and I don't have the Morgul Crown. Bear in mind, guys, I run this list before this Legion exists. I play all mounted wraiths. I always take the Undying, I always take Khamul, I take the Witch King with Crown, and then everything else is just filler. So this has got to impress me. Let's see what we go. Terror in the Night. A model in range of between 4 and 6 of models from this force with the Harbinger of Evil special rules suffers an additional -1 to their courage. A model in range of 7 to 9 suffers an additional -2. So Harbinger of Evil stacks. When you have 4 to 6 wraiths, you're getting -2. When you have 7 to 9, you're getting -3. Combine that with the fact that every wraith has Drain Courage on a 2+, and if you don't have heroes who are fearless, you can seriously be hampered by having all of your heroes completely unable to charge, or very rarely charging. I think I did the math, and I think it was like a 17% chance or something of a Courage 1 model charging. Yeah, wow. Can't reduce it below 0 though. It only goes down to 1. Screech of the Nazgul. Each ring wraith can, once per game, cast the channeled version of the Transfix magical power without declaring a heroic channeling. This magical power is automatically cast, counting as being cast on a 6, and no will points are expended. People can resist as normal, and you got to make sure that you note which one did it, because it's each wraith once. That is huge. I love it so much. I think it was something I did, or at least something similar that I did in my Black Riders Legendary Legion for Ardor Unleashed last year. It's so cool. Love the pants off of it. The Will of Sauron. And this is the rule that changes the way I play Ringwraiths forever. Friendly Ringwraith models do not lose a will point for being in combat as part of their Will of Evil special rule. That's massive. Massive, massive, massive. So no longer are you being more defensive. You can be so aggressive with this army now, to a point. So straight away, I'm taking fate points on my wraiths now. I take very few on when I play this list normally, because usually you don't put them in a position where they're going to need to roll fate, or you're already losing. So yeah, I'm just going to be chucking all fate in and going hard. Might, fate, heroic combats. I'm not even worried about will now. The will is just like free utility spells around the place. So that's huge. Love it. And then the final special rule is Hunt the Ringbearer. At the start of the fight phase, before other heroic actions are declared, if it is possible for a Ringwraith to charge an enemy model that has the one ring following a successful heroic combat, the Ringwraith may declare a heroic combat without spending might. Only one Ringwraith can declare this free one per turn. If successful, the Ringwraith that declared the heroic combat has to charge the Ringbearer, but other models can move as normal. The player who declared this free heroic automatically wins the roll-off for any heroic roll-offs, but they have to do that free one first. So a really cool themey thing to give them a little buff for targeting the ring. So I love this Legion. I really do. The Harbinger of Evil stack is amazing. The Channeled Transfixes, so good. And the Will of Sauron is phenomenal. I think it's good. I don't think it's Riders of Theoden good. That's my benchmark. You know, Rivendell Elves, Riders of Theoden, Iron Hills, all of those lists that are really tough, like the big Lake Town lists. I'm keen to see it on the table. I'm used to playing the normal race, which are always hard mode. These will definitely be stronger than that. But I'm losing the Undying, which is massive. Pew, 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 flam. That's what you do every turn with the Undying. And I'm losing the Witch King's Crown, man. That's hard to let go of. Khamul is fine. Yeah, I've only got one model with Heroic Strike now. But that is serious. That doesn't matter with the Heroic Strike because you got so much Transfix that's channeled. So if this Legion needed something, I would have gone with one of three options. I would have made them all 2 attacks. Obviously, they've got horses, they're on the charge, but that would have made I would have been sitting on this being like, this is powerful. I don't think they're overpowered in any way or close to it right now. So you could potentially buff to just the basic Ringwraith attacks, but that probably could have been buffing it too much. I would have given, don't give the Witch King the crown, but give him something similar that's effectively the crown. So give him the reroll cast, or don't even give him the reroll cast, just buff his attacks. I think that would have been potentially useful as well. Yeah, so we'll see, I think. I mean, they're going to have a lot of offensive magic because of their ability to not worry about will points because of the Will of Sauron, so maybe that's going to be enough to tip the scales, but I feel like they might be just slightly underdone again. Because, yeah, I mean, for me, the whole thing with these Legendary Legions is I shouldn't be... In my mind, I don't want them to make themey choices more takeable. I want them to make themey choices on par with all the best lists. That's what I'd like Legions to do. So I'd like to be able to take Black Riders to a top-tier tournament and have a shot at podium, because that would be badass. Podiuming with the 9... That would be amazing. So I think they're very, very powerful, and hopefully they're powerful enough. I'm definitely running them out of tournaments soon. Very cool. Okay, one Legion left, and this one's a cracker of a Legion, guys. You're gonna love this. Cirith Ungol. So many people have been running this themed list, particularly in Australia. You know, the guys on the Green Dragon talk about it all the time. Get Shelob, Shagrat, Gorbag, bunch of Orcs, bunch of Mordor Uruk-hai. Well, now you can, with rules. So, let's go through our contingents. We've got Shagrat and Gorbag. Obviously, they've all got their shields and armor. We've got Shelob, which is the first interesting choice here. Shelob's a part of this. Mordor Uruk-hai, Orc Shaman, important. Orc Captain, Orc Warrior, Mordor Uruk-hai. So we've got those 2 flavors. You must always include Shagrat and Gorbag, so you can't run this with Shelob at low levels. Shagrat's always the leader. Only Orc heroes can go in Orc warbands. Only Uruk-hai can go in Uruk-hai warbands. Exact same as the Uruk-hai Scouts Legion. And, just like the Scouts, we have Animosity. So, if you've got Orcs and Uruks fighting in a combat together, in base-to-base, not in support, you get +1 to wound. Very, very cool. Rivals for power. Keep track of how many models Gorbag and Shagrat have each killed. If at any point one of them has fewer kills than the other, that model may re-roll a single d6 when making a dual roll. Very, very cool. Not insanely overpowered, but just a little bit of theme that could prove, quite useful in a key moment. Then we have... She hungers for sweetmeats. Shelob adds 1 to her attack characteristic when involved with a fight with a man, elf, dwarf, and hobbit model. See, there's a keyword tag. I got you there. I got you. So when she's fighting a man, an elf, a dwarf, or a hobbit, she is 2 attacks, baby. That's insane. In good versus evil tournaments, that's going to be massive, massive, massive. And then we have... She is always hungry. She always needs to feed. At the start of her move phase, so long as she is not engaged in a fight, Shelob can choose to kill and remove a friendly model within 1 inch of her. If she does, she can re-roll any number of dice when making a dual roll. So Shelob's on the flank. Start of her move, she eats an orc, flies in full move, gets her sexy monstrous charge with 2 attacks, and then re-rolls those dual dice. I love it so much. It's really cool. I think they're super awesome. I just love this Legion. I really love this Legion. I think it's great. It's good theme. I think it's definitely competitive as. Shelob's a beast. I genuinely think she's undercosted. She's just, obviously there's the survival instinct thing, but you can just mitigate it if you're a good general. And Shagrat's top tier. Combine that with some really lovely things. Is it Orc Warriors? No, it's Orc Models. So even your Shagrats and your Gorbags are getting that +1 to wound from Animosity. That's massive. Love this list. We'll be seeing that on Top Table. Now, the lists are done, the profiles are done, the scenarios are done. There is but one thing that remains. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we have a fantasy fellowship. Many moons ago in White Dwarf and Battle Games in Middle-earth, there was a series of articles and rules where you could build your own Fellowship of the Ring, and in his infinite wisdom, Mr. J. Clare has returned it to the fold. We have a set of rules that allow you to build your own Fellowship of the Ring. Let's dive in.
9 companions. So be it. You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
Right. Where are we going?
Oh man, I just looked ahead at what's after this and I'm freaking out. Okay, so how do we build our fantasy fellowship? Well, what you gotta do is essentially select 9 members, but there are rules. You gotta pick your Ringbearer. You've only got 4 choices: Frodo Baggins, Bilbo Baggins from the Shire versus Thorin's company, and then Smeagol. They're your Ringbearer options. Step 2, you gotta pick your Ringbearer's companion. They can be any Hobbit hero that isn't your Ringbearer, obviously, but they can't be any of the 4 Hobbit travelers who come back after War of the Ring. Alternatively, if you choose Bilbo Baggins as your Ringbearer, you can choose any companion from Thorin's company, but they have to be under 60 points. Very, very cool indeed. Okay, step 3, the rest of the Fellowship. So, Merry and Pippin can be replaced by any named hero models in the game. However, neither may cost more than 50 points each, including any wargear that you purchase for them. Gandalf the Grey must be replaced by a hero model from the following list, all of which can utilize a variety of different magical powers: Gandalf the Grey, Saruman the White, Radagast the Brown, Galadriel, Elrond, Master of Rivendell, Celeborn, Círdan, Arwen Undomniel, Gildor Inglorian, or Thranduil, King of the Woodland Realm. If Saruman the White is selected as a wizard, then you may include Grima Wormtongue as a member of your fellowship. There are so many possibilities already. Okay, the remaining members of your fellowship, Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Boromir, can be replaced by any other named hero models that you choose. Remember that whoever you choose to replace certain characters will take on their role. So if you choose Prince Imrahil as your replacement for Aragorn, then Imrahil will be fighting at Helm's Deep. And it's important to remember that Boromir dies. You can't take Boromir past his death count. So whoever you choose Boromir, he's gonna die, okay? Alright, so there are a few additional steps to take into account when building your fantasy fellowship. Naturally, all of your heroes have to be good, no evil models, although, you could house rule that if you wanted to, if you're playing something crazy. Your fellowship can't exceed 750 points. If you choose another character who can take the ring, they do not get it, because of course the Ringbearer has it. You can purchase all additional war gear. Heroes that are bought as a pair, such as Eladon and Elroy here in Murin and Dra, they have to take up 2 slots. Everyone must have the infantry keywords. The rule of 1 applies, so you can't take multiples of the same profile. And it's best if they're themed, and the only models that cannot be taken are Tom Bombadil, Goldberry, Gandalf the White, and Galadriel, Lady of Light. So that's her war aspect profile. Very, very cool. So, what the hell do we do with this fantasy fellowship? Well, it's a quirky little thing. I guess we just play through the Ringbearer scenarios, right? Of course not. Of course not. Jay has written an entire separate campaign for your fantasy fellowships. So this is another 23 narrative scenarios. And the scenarios themselves are scenarios from this book and scenarios from other supplements and books. And basically this campaign, it's 23 long, and it's not just the Ringbearer's journey. So it's got like a little bit of everything. It starts off with the full fellowship journey, and then it follows a bit of the 3 hunters, it follows a bit of Merry and Pippin, it follows a bit of the Ringbearer, and then it all sort of comes together. So let's have a look at, we've got Buckleberry Ferry, Fog on the Barrow Downs, Weathertop, all the Moria stuff, the Armor Hen stuff, and then we split off. We've got Ambush at Night, which is obviously Merry and Pippin. We've got the Warg Attack with Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli. We've got a couple of Helm's Deep scenarios. We've got the Dead Marshes with Frodo and Sam. We've got Osgiliath, Shelob's Lair, Cirith Ungol. We've got Minas Tirith atop the walls. Charge of the Rohirrim, Pelennor Fields, Denethor's Madness, the Docks of Harlon, that's more Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, and then the big final one is the Plateau of Gorgoroth, leading into the end of all things. So a really cool, eclectic scenario. Now, on top of that, you get a roster, a Fantasy Fellowship roster, and then in addition to that, there is a bunch of extra special, juicy stuff that occurs throughout the campaign. So, the White Wizard. Following the Bridge of Khazad-dûm scenario, Gandalf, or whoever Gandalf is, it no longer participates in the campaign. However, Gandalf is reborn as Gandalf the White for the Éomer's Return scenario, and he will be restored to his fight values of Might, Will, Fate, and Wounds. If you replace Gandalf, then whoever replaces him will also disappear, and to represent them coming back more powerful, your member of their fellowship will improve all of their casting values by 1, and add their attacks from 1 to 2. That is absolutely nuts. So cool. However, if you pick... Oh, this is so cool! If you pick Galadriel, then she comes back as Galadriel, Lady of Light, which is her war aspect profile. I love that so much. Boromir, he dies after Armor Hen, so you can't keep taking him. When your Ringbearer reaches Rivendell, he gains the Mithril Coat and Sting, unless your Ringbearer is Smeagol, in which point he gets an additional point of Might and Fate. When you get Lothlorien, when you reach Lothlorien, all of your fellowship get the gifts, and those 8 gifts are the exact same gifts from the Breaking of the Fellowship Legendary Legion. So there's 8, the Elven Rope, the daggers, the Blinding Light, all of that stuff. Very cool. And they're gonna have that for the rest of the campaign. Maybe I'll play this campaign. This is cool. Helm's Deep. The Battle of Helm's Deep, the 3 hunters don armor, so they put armor on, and then they already have armor for the rest of it. Merry and Pippin, from the Pelennor Field scenarios, they put their armor on, and by the time he has awoken in Cirith Ungol, Frodo no longer has Sting or the Mithril Coat, or carries the File of Galadriel, and then Sam gets Sting. And then I guess the final thing is the Black Gate. Oh wow. Okay, so Aragorn upgrades to the Aragorn King Elisar profile for the final battle, the Black Gate. Absolutely mental. The last couple of pages are some pretty insane fantasy fellowships put together by various members of the GW team. And then we've got a little Weathertop painting masterclass, which is a nice little surprise as Games Workshop try to convince us all to spend many hundreds of pounds on the gorgeous Weathertop model from Forge World. And that is Quest of the Ringbearer. So, what do we think, guys? Let me know in the comments. I love it. I love the pants off of it. We've had so many scenarios that are huge, big theaters of war, and then we saw the Scouring of the Shire, which was a much more contained, but still a theater of war. And you know, this is like D&D, right? This is proper bit of story progression. There's a little bit of really RPG light elements. It's very fun. I'm really excited by how driven it is. The level of work that Jay has put into representing all of the unique themey moments in tabletop form, because it's scenario play. This is where Lord of the Rings lives and dies. It eats scenario play for breakfast. It's really good. I'm so excited to start playing it. So narrative scenarios, campaigns, Fantasy Fellowship, I think it's golden. You're going to love the pants off of it. I really like the new profiles are awesome. Whether or not we needed another 2 Rangers of Gondor is interesting, but they're good, and I do love those characters, so it's nice that we've got those. I think the Rangers of Ithilien Legendary Legion, it is what it is. I just think it's very boring. From a gameplay point of view, but I love the theme, so it'd be interesting to see if that starts to dominate. I think once it gets to that like 600 points of all bows, like, yes, it's a one-trick pony and whatever, but like, it's going to come up against big heroes, and probably it's not going to be overpowered. I just don't like the play style of ranger lists. I just think it's a bit boring for the other player, and that's an important game design consideration, but yeah, anyway. Mori is awesome. Breaking the Fellowship's amazing. The Black Riders is awesome. Maybe needed a bit more power, but that could be my huge bias coming through for ring rates because I love them. What else have we got? We got Lurtz as Hunters. Again, that one I think genuinely is probably a little underdone. I think it's a really cool list, but I need to play games with it, of course. All this theory hammer, but I think it's powerful. It's got Lurtz in there. It's got Ugluk. It's a good list. What's it? It's probably okay. Giving the heroes the movement buff. I just think of, Animosity and Ugluk Scouts was just like such a visual cool thing. So I guess there wasn't enough like cool thing in there for me, but it's probably fine from a balance point of view. Make the shield throw auto hit. Sod that. Make him knock people over. And then Cirith Ungol, which is like absolutely baller. So all in all, I would give it A+. 98 out of 100, because I want my ring knights to have more special rolls. Love it. Absolutely love the pants of it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. This is bound to have been quite a long video. It may be 1. I might break it up into 2. So thank you for tuning in and watching the full review. I cannot wait to get into smashing out some of these scenarios or whatever we do with this awesome book here on the channel. There's so much possibility. The Fantasy Fellowship would be fun, but slotting it into our production schedule could be pretty hard. Make sure, if you guys want to score yourself the full set of Balin's Tomb, we're going to be doing some sort of Balin's Tomb gameplay as I knock up a Balin's Tomb gaming board, or the one from stream, and we're going to give this away to one of our Patreons. So if you want to be eligible to score yourself the Balin's Tomb pieces, make sure you head over to Patreon. And just in general, if you want to support what I'm doing here on the channel and keep me able to making videos, Patreon is an awesome way to do that. So links down in the description. Shout out to GW for sending me over my book early. Thank you very much, guys. Always nice to get these videos out for people and get you all informed so you know what you're pre-ordering. And when they're making content like this, it's pretty easy to click that pre-order button. So I will see you all very soon. Well done, Middle-earth team, and let's get questing for the Ringbearer.